So my name is Christina Reese. I'm in talent acquisition. I've been with Enterprise for 7 years. I started off as a management trainee, worked my way up to a branch manager, and then into talent acquisition. And I'm also here with Felice.
Hi, so I'm Felice Starr. I also work in talent acquisition with Christina. I've been with Enterprise for going on 9 years. And so I, of course, started off as management trainee, worked my way up. I'm actually originally from New York City, and so I worked my first 7.5 years there, and then got promoted to oversee the talent acquisition department here in Tampa.
Fantastic. And because we've been in recruitment for many years collectively, we interview about, I would say about 100 people over the phone, doing phone interviews. And we also interview collectively about 20 people face to face. And so we want to really be able to share those, the ways that we can help you become more competitive in your interview and then in your job search as well. So we're going to talk about the seeking virtual events. How to prepare for that virtual interview, and the do's and don'ts of the interview, and then how to close.
So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to talk a bit about seeking virtual events, right? Because the climate of things has changed so much over the past few weeks, and it's changed really quickly. So we were slowly progressing into this kind of more virtual space where, okay, if you wanted to try out a virtual career fair or a virtual presentation, you could do that. And now we're kind of leaping into a situation where that's really all that's available. And what's being found now is that that's something that companies are going to want to start doing more and more of. And so it's going to be important to engage with employers during these virtual events or different types of live streams. So a lot of the time, it's your career services folks who are kind of like giving you lots of emails and recommendations on things to do. But it's kind of changing where it's not going to just be them giving you recommendations. You're actually going to need to go and seek them out and ask them, because our career services folks have so many connections with hundreds of employers. So they're going to be your best bet when it's like, hey, I really need to do X, Y, and Z, or I'm really interested in A, B, or C company. Hey, let me seek out what they have going on virtually. And that could include a virtual career fair hosted by your college or by a partner, or it can include a webinar, something similar to this, giving you some different skill building sets. It also can include following up on LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn has become a lot larger in the past 4 to 5 years than it has been previously, where now just about every single student has a LinkedIn and they try to actively be on it. It's also a really great place to find, hey, are there any webinars going on, any fairs that are maybe with multiple colleges that are promoting different positions in the industry I'm looking for. You really have to take ownership and seek out these type of events.
So preparing for a virtual interview is going to be very similar to preparing for an in-person, face-to-face interview. What's really important to understand is that we're still going to be able to evaluate your competencies or your skills that you bring to the table. We're still going to be able to see your body language. Are you making eye contact? Are you smiling? And so really the first step into in preparing for a virtual interview is to really find a great space that you're comfortable in, working in. So you have to keep in mind the lighting, keep in mind, are you too close to a window, the noise level, and also what's behind you, because that person is literally going to be in your living room and you don't want to be embarrassed by any posters in the living room or wherever you're sitting. And also, of course, the noise. The other thing is going to be internet. So making sure you have a great connection wherever you are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be at home. It could also be a library if you don't really have a good space at home. And then, of course, you're going to still have to put your best foot forward as far as your professional image. So although it's virtual, you might be in your living room, you do still have to dress up for success. So definitely put on a suit, make sure your hair is done, makeup is done. Really be careful for the trends right now, just depending on your industry. If with the piercings, the tattoos, it can be, if you have any kind of tattoos, you might want to kind of cover up depending on what you're wearing or where those tattoos are. And then also just really important is to become familiar with the video interviewing software, because companies like Enterprise, we're using business Skype for interviews. Some companies are using Zoom, and others are using HireVue. With these interview platforms, you don't really know unless you sign in, if there's an assessment. A lot of them are incorporating game-based assessments. So if you weren't, early in there, or if you didn't realize, then doing all of these things will help you be more prepared and give you that competitive edge over your competition.
Yeah, that I can't reiterate enough how important it is to still continue with the professional image. Fun fact, Walmart put out some stats that they are up in sales in tops but not bottoms. And so lots of people who are working from home or doing things from home and just buying a top. I don't know how confident I would feel if like the top of me was dressed up, but my bottom part wasn't, and I was in like pajama pants or something. So dressing good also goes into how you feel and your confidence level. When you look good, you feel good, and that really comes across even in a video. And so getting to know the company is going to be really important, right? If you're doing a webinar or you're doing an interview for a specific company, you're going to want to do your research. And so normally, if we were in a classroom setting, I would kind of ask, where can you get this research at? But I'm going to skip past that this time and let you know it's really the company's website. Companies spend literally millions of dollars designing their website and paying someone to write specific things that are going to kind of catch the eye of people that they want to work for them. And so going to a company's website, going to that career section, reading the different things that company has done, that's going to really help you to prepare for your interview or a webinar or any type of virtual interaction with someone from that company. Look for things that are important to you. That's very important. One thing I always say is I remember the person who told me, hey, Felice, I really love how Enterprise is spending $60 million to feed the hungry. That really speaks to me. Well, if someone told me that, I'm going to remember that person because they made it personal for me. And if someone comes up to me and just kind of shoots off 6 different facts about Enterprise, that, by the way, I already know, right? Recruiters already know everything there is to know about their company. That's not memorable. But someone who comes up to me with one specific fact and talks to me about how it's important to them, I'm going to remember that person. So that's something that you should do. And then get a job description. This kind of plays into that whole money spent on the website thing. We also spend lots of money for people to create our job descriptions for us because we want them to be super specific in terms of these are the skills that I want in order to have a good candidate that can become a good employee. And so don't be afraid to read through job descriptions and pull from the job description. If it says in a job description, we want someone creative and hardworking, well, I hope that you're speaking about how creative and hardworking you are when you get into a virtual platform with someone from that company. It's like having an open book test almost. And then obviously you want your resume that's focused on the position you're applying for. I'm sure Christina agrees, but there's so many times where we'll get a resume put in front of us and that like subject line or that header is completely irrelevant to the position they're applying for. And that's a bit hard to control, right? When you get an interview with me, if your headline says you want to work in like social work and I'm in the business sector, we're going to have a little chat about that. So it's really important to make sure it all just aligns and that you take the couple extra minutes just to make sure everything is all set up.
All right, so we're gonna go into the do's. So we kind of touched base on this earlier. Make sure that the technology works. Make sure that you have a great internet connection. The second one here is practice, record yourself. This is gonna seem a little uncomfortable at first, watching yourself on video, but it's really important to see how close you are to the camera. You don't wanna be too close. You don't wanna be too far. You wanna make sure that you're testing your audio as well. And also make sure that you join the meeting 10 minutes prior because you could have some technical issues. I remember that, this past week I had to join some webinars and there was a time where my internet was disconnected for some reason. So I had to go back and, connect to the internet, then join the meeting. So being early is really important for those types of reasons as well. And there are times where you're going to meet an employer virtually, whether it's through a LinkedIn webinar and they invite you to have an interview, and they may not necessarily have your updated resume. So I think another great point is to send your updated resume to their email address, catered based around that job description that you're really looking to get into. So like Felice said, if the objective of that job description is sales, marketing, creative, then you want to make sure that it's not insurance adjuster. My objective is to become an insurance adjuster, so make sure that you send an updated resume. Make really great eye contact during the interview, just like you would in a normal interview. Also remember to smile and remember to accentuate the positives. And so what that means is, when you're giving an example of a situation, if it was a challenging situation, make sure that you paint that situation in a positive light. What did you learn from that challenge?
So the don'ts. As Christina just mentioned, don't sign in right on time or late. If you're not 10 to 15 minutes early, then you're already late. You don't want to be that last ping into a meeting. And that's just good business practice, even when you move forward and you land the job. I never want to be like the last ping in on a meeting with my GM. Never. So you always want to be early. Don't talk too much, because obviously we want you speaking, but if you're doing 90% of the talking, then how much are you really getting out of it? Not much at all. Chewing gum is a big no-no. Just like if you were in person, you don't want to do anything that you wouldn't do in person. And so chewing gum is a big no-no if you're in person. It's the same thing if you're doing something virtually. Use of inappropriate language. And so I think that most of us would know not to use foul language in those kind of settings, but that also includes using common jargon. And so you may see that the person on the other side of the screen looks super laid back. Maybe like here at Enterprise, we're in our polos. We've had kind of like a business casual for the past few weeks. And then you kind of loosen up and you start using common jargon. Well, guess what? The recruiter is expecting you to still remain professional. And so using common jargon can totally get you, X'd off the list. So you want to make sure that you're using appropriate language at all times. Don't forget water and a tissue. I have my water right here. I'm doing a lot of talking, and I have my tissues there too. If you want to see them, they're in a purple box. But I'm doing a lot of talking. And so what happens if I need to cough or sneeze? I don't want to have to be looking all over the place, going through papers to find the things that I need. So the things that you need should be really close by you so you can easily grab them. And then don't look at your watch. I know we all have smart watches nowadays, or most of us tend to go towards that. And so a lot of alerts will start pinging in on your watch. And I am guilty of this. I can get better at it. But you have that habit to just kind of like look really quick to see, oh, was that alert? You don't want that. And so during the time that you're spent on a webinar or a virtual career fair, I mean, it's usually an hour to 3 hours max for maybe a virtual career fair. You can kind of shut everything else down for that period of time. Nothing that big of an emergency could be happening. So just a couple good don'ts. So moving forward.
All right, so we're going to get into the interview. And as I mentioned earlier, the virtual interview is not much different than the interview face-to-face. There are some, differences that we pointed out on how to better prepare for a virtual interview and how to connect. But going into the interview itself, it really is all about, how to make a great impression, being able to turn those negatives into positives. We also want to talk and touch base on behavioral interviewing, because that's going to be really important for the sales and marketing students and interns. That's going to be the way that most recruiters today are going to evaluate competencies and skills. And then how do you best answer those types of questions?
So the interview. So you always have to still make a good first impression. First impressions are still lasting, even if they're virtual. So although you might not be in someone's actual face, being able to shake their hand, smile, and give them the old razzle dazzle, you still need to make sure you do that virtually. So your presentation is going to be everything from the moment that you sign on to your hello, to just your overall smile, your eye contact, being able to show empathy or elation on your face. Those things are all very important. And so you want to be really careful to show your personality. You don't want to go extreme. You don't want to go overboard, but you also don't want to be dull and talking like this, because if you talk like this, I probably can't hear you well. And I'm not sure, hey, are you happy to be in this situation, on this call, in this virtual line of communication, or are you just doing this because you have to? And so personality is big. Of course, you have to have the skills to get the job, but a big part of it is personality too. You know, when we are doing interviews and we're hiring, a part of what we look for is like, hey, could we see this person as part of our team? And so that comes off with your personality. And so you want to make sure that that comes through even virtually, which can be challenging. Also want to be careful of nonverbal communication, right? And so are you smiling, or are you frowning and talking like a robot? You know, all those things matter. Delivery and animation, and then your presentation of ideas. And then of course your grammar and vocabulary. Can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that when you are speaking, you have kind of these well thought out words and thoughts and ideas, and it doesn't seem like you're kind of just pulling at grass or grasping at straws. And so that all comes in what we spoke about earlier, which was that preparedness, right? And making sure that you have the knowledge, you've done the research, and so when you get in the situation, you're not panicked and kind of pulling from thin air. Instead, you're speaking because you actually have knowledge on the things.
So this is a question that we get often in when we do this presentation, and it's about how do you turn a negative into a positive? You know, how do you paint that picture as a glass half full versus half empty? And I kind of touched base on it earlier, but really there's not really a good way or a great way for an interviewer to evaluate self-awareness. And that's something that's really important, especially in today's market, especially in a position like sales and marketing, where you have to work with clients, you have to work with customers face-to-face. And so how does an interviewer evaluate self-awareness is through, okay, give me an example of a time where you were, you know, what's your weakest attribute, right? What's your biggest weakness? But they don't typically ask you straightforward, what's your biggest weakness? It's going to be labeled or in a way where it's like, oh, tell me about it, you know, something that you're wanting to improve on, or if your friends could, you know, want it to improve one thing about you, what would that be? And so really figuring out what they're asking you is going to be important. And when they're asking you about a weakness, just be aware that the recruiters, we all have weaknesses. We're not wanting to dwell on that. We want to really understand, are you aware of those weaknesses, and really what are you doing? What plans have you put in place to overcome those in a positive way? So choose a weakness that you feel comfortable with, something that you've been working towards improving, and then really line out what you've done and what you've done to improve. And as a result, you know, how have you become more successful? Because that's going to really show them that when you come into this position, you'll be able to overcome these challenges in a positive way. So I don't know, Felice, if you want to give an example of that, or.
I think that one of the biggest, this is like the hard question, right? It's a super hard question on an interview because you're being asked to say that you're not as good as you want the interviewer to think you are, right? They're asking you for that weakness. And so it can be so many different things. Organization is often one that I hear of. And so especially for students, you can utilize, hey, when I first started in school as a freshman or even a sophomore, I wasn't as organized as I thought I was, right? I thought I was a very organized person before, but I started becoming overwhelmed because of all the different things that happened. I wanted to partake in extracurriculars and different clubs, and it became really difficult to juggle it all. And as a result, grades slipped or I missed assignments. And so I think a lot of schools or college students go through this moment where they have to then reevaluate, and they have to say, okay, let me come up with the schedule. Let me get this down packed so that I can become more organized. And then as time progresses, that gets more fine-tuned, and then you become more and more and more organized. And so I think that's a really great example for a college student to utilize, because when you enter into a new position, that's really a big part of it. You've never done this before, you're not familiar with the terrain, and it's going to seem like a lot, and I'm going to need you to utilize those same skills to get good at it. And so that's just one example. But there, I mean, it could be so many different things that you can utilize as long as you show how you were able to realize that it was an issue and then work through it to get to a positive end result. No one's ever going to fault you for that. I don't expect anyone to be perfect. I'm not perfect. So the interview, what is behavioral interviewing? And again, this is kind of one of those moments where I would say, who knows what behavioral interviewing is? And most people would kind of throw out a few different ideas, but not that many people know what it is. And it's not new. Actually, it's something that's been used for a very long time. And so the true definition of behavioral interviewing is the premise of interviewing where you look at past behaviors to predict future behaviors. And so instead of asking someone, are you good at customer service? I would ask that person, give me a specific example that would show me a time where you had to go above and beyond to provide excellent customer service. And so digging a little bit deeper and making an individual actually think back to their own experience. Behavioral questions are all competency-based. Competencies, a big word for skill. Every single position at every single company has a list of competencies or skills that are related to that position that are required of an individual to be able to earn that position. And so we'll go through some sample questions together, and then we'll also go through the STAR method, no relation to my last name, but a situation, task, action, and result. These are the 4 steps that you need to take when answering a behavioral interview question. Sometimes what happens is someone will get a behavioral interview question asked of them, and then they answer with what we call a traditional answer. So if I said, tell me a specific example of a time you went above and beyond for a customer, that's a behavioral interview question. And then someone will answer with a traditional answer of, I do that all the time. I'm great at customer service. That's not answering my question. And so we're going to role play through that together so that we can make sure you really understand it and you see how to answer it. Most times people do forget the result. That is probably 95% of the time what an individual will forget to give during an example. And that's because they think that the action that they took is the result. So if you know, a customer was upset because they didn't get the car that they wanted, right? Let's use an enterprise example. And then I said, well, I switched their car out for them. That's just the action that I took. It's not the end result. My end result would need to be they were happy, they decided to come back and rent from us again, they wrote a letter to my manager. That would be the result. And so that's why a lot of people get confused there, but we're going to work through it together.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to role play. Felicia and I are going to role play the first question, and then we would like some volunteers if anyone's open to or comfortable with doing a role play. If you could just go ahead and either in your chat just say, like, type your name, your first name for the second and third question, and then we can kind of go from there. So while you guys are deciding if you want to volunteer, Felice and I will go ahead and role play the first one here. So Felice, can you tell me about a time when you held a leadership position?
Absolutely. So I was actually asked by senior leadership to be the chairwoman for a women's initiative meeting. And it was a great honor to be even asked to be the chairwoman to do this meeting. And a big part of this meeting was planning for a group of over 40 women on this leadership meeting. And so that included planning the content, location, and food. And so what I did is I got a group of other employees who were interested to help me. And I delegated responsibility of location and food to the other 2 individuals so that I could focus on content. And because I know there's no I in team, after I put together all the content I wanted presented at the meeting, I actually circled back my team to see if they had any suggestions on my content or to see if it was clear for them. I also had them report back to me and let me know where they stood with location information and the food information. I also delegated some of the smaller items that most people don't think about but can be very time consuming, such as printing out agendas or making sure everyone would have a pen and a pad to write on during the meeting. After I did all of this, we put the meeting together. It went off without a hitch. It was fantastic. We got great feedback from senior leadership and from all the participants stating that it was one of the best meetings they've ever been to, that they couldn't wait for the next one. And so I was really pleased with that, and I will be planning the meeting next year as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so typically a recruiter or the interviewer at this point would ask follow-up questions or probing questions because, as Felice mentioned earlier, people tend to stop at the action step instead of providing the results. But she was able to work through all of those for the situation, task, action, and the results. So that would basically lead me to the opportunity to ask the next question. And typically, if an interview is going really well and you're answering that question, there aren't usually follow-up questions. So that's kind of like a giveaway to tell you that you're doing a great job if they're not asking you the same question in a different way. So if there, it doesn't sound like there are, or it doesn't look like there are any volunteers for the next couple of questions. Did anyone feel comfortable role-playing here? Cleo or Lindsay, Monica? If not, I completely understand. This was not part of, I'm not sure if you guys, you were not prepared for this. So I'll go ahead and go into the second question. And so I'm going to give you.
Were you going to volunteer? I saw you unmuted your mic.
Yeah, I mean, I can try the second one. I'm not sure if like a waitress job counts for selling like some products, but I can give it a try.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I am a waitress back home for the past 4 years. So usually they count on me when it comes to having new specials on the menu to kind of create a bond with the customers when they come in and try to upsell the product and talk to them about the food and everything and explain like the benefits of getting that food, why it's a good deal, why it's a good dish to have, and really to, how do I say it? And really to just grasp their attention and like make them feel like it's their idea to get it and make them feel like they really want it.
Awesome. And so that, first of all, you just said like waitress thing. That's a perfect example of being able to sell a product. I don't know that many people realize it, but in waitressing, you often have to upsell and do suggestive sales. So that was perfect. And so that your answer is definitely how I would want an answer to start off, right? Because you're kind of giving me, you're laying the ground, you're laying the framework for me so I can understand. The only addition I would say to that answer would be to think back to maybe one specific customer that you remember selling a special to, because that's kind of hitting the home run. So I can understand like, oh, she's actually done it before. Obviously, you're totally on the spot right now, so I don't expect you to know. I interview lots of people, so I can answer an on-the-spot question. But that would be the only thing that I would add to that is just making sure you have like, I don't know, I was never a waitress. They would never hire me. Can you believe that? But I would say like, hey, you know, Mrs. and Mr. Jones came in and I sold them on apple pie or whatever the case is, and kind of walk through how you were successful. Like maybe you described it to them, you asked them questions, you figured out, you know, things that they like to be able to sell it to them.
Okay.
Thank you for volunteering. Appreciate it.
That was awesome. Do we have another volunteer for the last question? No? All right, so we'll go ahead and, so for this question, what I want to do is kind of pull from your other experiences, because a lot of experience from your, you know, part-time positions like serving to your involvement in organizations can transfer really well into these types of questions, especially when it comes to sales and marketing. You know, when you think about this last question here, tell me about a time when you had an upset or challenging customer. You know, enterprise hires a lot of athletes, a lot of collegiate athletes across the US. And a lot of these athletes are D1 players, and they're not able to work. So how do they get hired into a company like Enterprise? Well, they use examples of times where they were able to recruit a high school student that went to the same high school, or you know, came from the same state that they were in, and really how they were able to build that relationship and rapport, or how they were able to diffuse one of those recruits. You know, maybe they were upset about like the flight, and they were able to diffuse that situation for them, make them feel really good, and they were able to still, you know, as a result, commit to their team. And so keep in mind that your involvement in organizations is really useful in these types of examples. You know, especially when you're taking on leadership roles and you're dealing with other vendors. Have you ever dealt with an upset or angry vendor, or someone who, you know, there was a deadline and they weren't able to be there on time? So be able to, you know, make sure that you pull from that as well. Perfect. All right.
All right, so moving on to the close. And so the close is really important. That's where you get to sell yourself. And that's your last chance. And so if you want a redeeming moment, it's definitely in your close. You want to be prepared with questions. One of my pet peeves is when someone does not have a question. You always should have a question. And so I completely understand. There are some things that do get answered throughout the interview process, right? What are the next steps in the interview? What's the career path? What was your story? Those are some of the common questions that maybe you might ask on a phone interview, or maybe you've asked already during an interview. But you should definitely think of, if you didn't come in with questions throughout that interview while you're speaking, utilize that time to kind of make some cliff notes of things that you might have questions on. And so that might not be, it doesn't have to be a profound question, right? But it could be, where do you see the business in the next 5 to 10 years? You know, that's a great question that you can ask a recruiter at the end of an interview. It doesn't need to be profound, like, hey, I've looked at your financials and da 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 da. It doesn't need to be that. But you should always have some sort of a question. It could even be, hey, what made you passionate about choosing your position? Right? Just something that shows your interest. That's how recruiters gauge your level of engagement, is based on the conversation that you give them and the questions that you ask. Also, make sure you completely understand the position. So if you've gone in for an interview and you still have questions about the position, that's an issue. You want to make sure you understand it. I've interviewed lots of people who I'm going through their resume. I'm like, oh, why did you go to work at this place? And then why did you leave so fast? And they're like, well, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I'm like, okay, well, when could we have found that out? Like, yeah, I didn't ask that many questions during the interview process. I really was rushing to get a job. You always want to make sure that you fully understand the position, because it's not great to have, you know, a bunch of like 2 to 3 month jobs on your resume. And it happens. I mean, I remember before I started working at Enterprise, I've had a couple of retail jobs before, and you don't stay at them for forever sometimes. But it looks a lot better when you have that consistency. And then you can always ask what the next step is if it wasn't explained to you. If it's explained to you, you don't need to keep asking just because you feel like you need to ask. That's happened to me as well. You don't have to keep asking. And then make sure you're expressing your interest in the position. That's your closing moment. If you are interested, please make sure that you say, I'm extremely interested in this position. Are there any things that are standing out to you from our interview that I could clarify that would keep me from gaining this opportunity? Or conversely, if you hear all about this position, you ask your questions and it's not what you thought it was going to be, make sure you express that as well. No recruiter is going to be offended. They're actually going to be grateful, because then you're saving them time, yourself time, and anyone else who's involved in that process. And in fact, you might even be allowing someone else the opportunity to have a job or a position or a chance at a job or position by stepping down and saying, you know what, this really isn't for me, so that that recruiter can go ahead and work with someone who it might be for. Follow up after the interview is also great. I say usually within 24 hours. Now that we have email, it's much easier to kind of really quickly draft an email. It does not need to be like a 4-page letter. A nice paragraph, maybe 3 to 4 sentences would suffice. Some people do like sending thank you cards, and I like receiving them. The only thing is that the USPS doesn't move as fast as our electronic email does. And so you may be sending me a handwritten card or thank you, and I don't get it until 4 days after. And my decision is probably already made by then. And so you want to try to do it in the fastest way possible. So let's look ahead together. But before we do, does anyone have any questions on any of the information we just covered? You can type them in the chat box if you do. Give it a couple of seconds. Don't be afraid to ask a question. No question is too small. We do, as Christina says, we do about 100 phone interviews a week and 20 face-to-face interviews a week. And so if you have a question about any type of interviewing, we would be really good people to ask.
So what do you recommend that you put in the follow-up email?
Great question. Christina, do you want to answer or I can answer? I feel like I've been taking a little bit of your talking time.
Yeah, no, it's so in the follow-up emails, I like to get thank you letters that are, like Felice said, short and sweet. You know, it was a pleasure getting to speak with you. What was, one highlight that you received from that interview, something that really stood out to you that you're excited about? So maybe something that you're looking forward to, maybe a skill that you're excited to be able to use in that new position. And that you're looking forward to the next step. So just short and sweet, those 3 points would do really well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. So we are going to spend some more time talking about some opportunities that we have here at Enterprise. And so Enterprise truly is world-class. And right now, I'm sure every single person is aware that there's a lot going on in the world. And honestly, I couldn't be prouder to work for the company that I work for than at a moment like this. We are ranked by Forbes as one of the largest companies in America, largest private companies. We're number 12, which is really impressive considering that we are only a 60-year-old company. A lot of those companies are 100-year plus companies. And so we've really been able to grow and sustain that growth consistently really quickly as compared to some other companies. We operate the largest fleet of passenger vehicles in over 90 countries, which is amazing. We're literally the largest rental car company in the world, which is really amazing. We have over 2 million vehicles in our fleet and over $26 billion in revenue just last year. We were ranked as the largest recruiter for college graduates for the past 5+ years. And we actually hire as a company about 11,000 US college grads every year, which is a really big number. We've been ranked #1 as an entry-level employer by collegegrad.com since 2014 or 2015, including last year. And then we have over 10,000 locations and over 100,000 team members, and we're a privately held company. So that just goes to show you, we do everything from within. We're a grow from within company. And so it's really amazing to see how much we've grown even in the 9 years that I've been working for this company. We are committed to environmental stewardship. And so we have our website, Driving Futures, and we are consistently giving back. We actually have on our world headquarters campus, we literally have a laboratory and we work with automotive companies to figure out how they can make more fuel efficient vehicles. And a good percentage of our fleet of 2 million vehicles do have some sort of like flex fuel option, electric or hybrid option, because we want to lessen our impact. And then last year we gave back $36 million to our local communities, which is pretty cool because what Enterprise does is it gives the checkbook to the local operating group. So for Tampa, I get that checkbook and I get to say, hey, employees, literally, where do you think we should give back to? What's important to you? Which organizations locally should we give back to versus the company just mandating like, okay, we're giving back to this one place and that's it. That's going to be our giving back for the year. So that's really near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, locally, we're really involved with like the Humane Society. Also, we do the Susan Coleman Walk every year. But so, you know, we talked a little bit about how we're undergoing this this global health crisis together, and we want everyone to know that Enterprise, we are on call for all, as the slide says. We're all in this together. There is not one industry that is safe from the effects of COVID-19, and so we're really committed to helping our frontline responders with transportation, and we're also committed to making sure that companies, we have a lot of volunteer companies in the Hillsborough area that need vehicles to move around, people who are, still, we have accidents, day to day. So we are committed to providing you the best service as an essential service provider. And Enterprise will remain open and dedicated to serving you, and also those in the front lines of service. So we're standing by with critical mobility options for paramedics, nurses, doctors, and military and government personnel, and for your personal and business needs, like I just mentioned. We've actually done some things, like we've decreased the age limit. So because a lot of colleges and universities had to close down nationwide, that left a lot of students with a transportation issue to get back home. And so with the airlines being grounded and things like that, or sold out. So Enterprise decreased the age limit so that college students could actually rent a car at the age of 18 versus having to be 21. And then there's some discounts for our first responders as well and our military personnel beyond what we had already allocated. So we are on call for all. So we want to get into some of the opportunities that we have available as well. The first one that we did want to share, I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember which, we have some 2022 grads, May 2021. So for you, May 2021 grads, we do have a management trainee internship that can give you great experience. It's actually going to be very similar to the full-time position that requires a bachelor's degree, but this one is, you just have to be 2 to 3 semesters away from graduating. We do provide a spring, summer and fall internship. We're looking for seniors, and it's part-time, so you're able to work your school schedule around, Enterprise will work around your school schedule, which is really nice. And then it's also paid. So it's $12 per hour. You're able to gain some really valuable skills in terms of the customer service. It's a very friendly, competitive atmosphere. So how to have friendly competition, how to track your performance on a regular basis, time management, multitasking, and great skills like that. And then also be able to apply what you're learning in your marketing classes and your sales classes to, because we are selling different protection products, we're going out to local accounts and marketing to them as well. And this internship could lead to a full-time offer after you graduate with your bachelor's degree.
And so we do also have full-time opportunities for after graduation if you're thinking far ahead for that long term. We hire from all majors, so we are major blind, and we actually do all of our promotions from within. So I'm going to show you a photo on the next slide that kind of graphs and maps that out. We do offer full benefits, and our benefits are paid in a large portion by the company. And so that may not mean too much for some of you right now, but down the line, it definitely will, as that's usually a major heartburn as people start to develop within a career, is wanting to make sure they have good benefits. We do have a 401k that we match up to 3%. And then after 1 year, you also get profit sharing. So I shared that our company made $26 billion in profits last year. Well, I got a portion of those profits into my 401k because I'm enrolled in that, which is pretty awesome, free money. You can earn yourself a company car after you hit the branch manager level. And we're a fun and competitive company. We are family owned, and that's really on all levels within our company is that family vibe. I mentioned that I came here from New York City, and so coming to a new group could be scary for some people who were transferring with work. But for me, it was like nothing because it was the same. Family at work in New York was just same as family at work in Tampa. And so that's a huge part culturally of our business that is really attractive. And so this is our timeline that I was just speaking about. And everyone starts off here in this management trainee position. And that's the unique thing about our company. Everyone, even up to our CEO, our last two female CEOs, were first management trainees. And then they were able to get promoted internally. So generally, by your 8-month mark, you're in this management assistant role where we've kind of just tested your basic knowledge on the business. And if you can demonstrate that you have basic knowledge on customer service, a little bit of sales and marketing, understanding the risk management, the business management, you get an automatic promotion. So you go from starting off here to getting a promotion maybe in your first 8 months. Then usually by your first year, year and a half, you can be an assistant manager. And by your first 2 years, a branch manager. So that's lots of promotions just in 2 years. Our branch managers also get company cars. So they get to take a car home from the lot every night. They don't pay for car insurance. They don't pay for gas. They don't pay for preventative maintenance. And they're basically just always driving around in a brand new, right now, 2020 vehicle. I have had my 2020 since before 2020. And so it's pretty cool because you usually get your car like 6 months before it even comes out because we buy in such large stock that the dealers sell to us before they sell to dealerships. So it's pretty cool. And then you can grow from there. And so our branch managers, once they've mastered what it is to run that operation on their own, they can say, okay, well, now I see an opportunity in vehicle repair. I think that that might be a good fit. Let me get with my mentor and sit down and see if that really is a good fit for me. Or they can say, you know what, I want to continue on. I want to be an area manager and oversee multiple branches. Well, our area managers oversee anywhere between 4 to 10 branch managers. So talk about leadership and like managing through others. That's what this role is all about. And you can get there within 5 years, which is huge. And our area managers make 6-figure salaries and they get a little bit nicer of a company car. If you want to keep moving up in that direction, you can be a group manager. Group managers usually hit that role around the 10-year mark, and our group managers oversee 4 to 5 area managers. So really, again, that leadership piece. And our group managers have hundreds of employees that are direct reporting underneath them. So that's pretty cool. And you can move up as far as you want. My current GM was once a management trainee. Any regional vice president was once a management trainee. And so it's really amazing to see that anyone who's ahead of you has been in your shoes, and their one goal every single day is to get you promoted. To work for a company like that has been amazing, to know that the person ahead of me, their one goal every day is just to make sure I'm in a position to get promoted. All right, so thank you so much for all your time and attention today. We're going to be sending you some emails. Thanks for sharing your information in the chat box. But you can also connect with Christina and I on LinkedIn as well. It's just both of our first and last names. And if you have any questions, we do have a few extra minutes. So if any questions have come up now, we'd be more than happy to answer them for you. So right now we are paused on hiring as are most companies. We are looking, we already had filled our summer internship, just about. And so what we are looking now towards is the fall hiring for fall interns.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, thank you again for your attention. If any additional questions come up, our email addresses are there. We are pretty accessible, so feel free to reach out to us, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.